Hello and welcome back to another Monster Monday, a series where I draw a creature from D&D and I talk about its lore and its history and what it's like to fight. Although traditionally I draw one of your suggestions, and believe me there are plenty to be getting on with, this week is going to be the anniversary of the Arcane Forge. We've been doing this for a whole year, guys. So I thought, as a celebration, I would draw one of my favourite monsters. It's also one of the favourite monsters of my D&D group. This monster provided one of the best interactions in my entire time playing Dungeons and Dragons, and I'm not sure if that was down to the quality of the DM, don't worry, that's not me being boastful, my good friend was DMing at the time for us, or if this is an equal part because of how amazing the monster is as a whole. But I hope that by the end of the video, my enthusiasm and the special place that this monster holds in my heart can be passed on to you as well. Today we are going to be talking about the Nilbog. So the first thing that you might notice that makes this video stand out from my other ones is that I'm using photo reference today. You should see a little picture of my puppy, Myrtle. She's one of two dogs that we have at home. And I'm going to be using Myrtle as reference because she is the embodiment of the Nilbog. We often call her the little goblin, the little Nilbog, sometimes Nildog. She is insanely cheeky, very, very fun, and definitely extremely impish and goblin-like. So I'll be drawing my little Nilbog as the Nilbog today, trying to capture her likeness. At least a little bit. But Nilbogs are an unusual choice. I think they've come up in comment suggestions maybe once, other than through my D&D group. They're a lesser known creature in D&D, and in fact I was even surprised to find out that 5th edition wasn't this creature's first appearance. If you want to use the Nilbog, you can find it in Volo's Guide in 5th edition, but actually the Nilbog appeared first as a part of 1981's Fiend Folio, written by Don Turnbull for 1st edition. The Fiend Folio was originally a column written by Don Turnbull in White Dwarf magazine, but Gary Gygax loved Turnbull's creations so much that he hired him to manage TSR, the company that was publishing D&D before Wizards of the Coast, but he hired him to manage TSR's operations in the UK. The inclusion of the Nilbog that far back made me wonder if I've missed out on this absolutely amazing creature and its antics in other editions too. So if, like me, you've missed out on a couple of editions, you might be wondering. But if you've played every edition to death and have encountered the Nilbog in other editions other than 1st and 5th, make sure to let me know down in the comments. It would be wonderful to know if the Nilbog is a staple of D&D or if it has just arisen, or just been revitalized rather, for 5th edition after a long absence in 1st. But what is a Nilbog, aside from the word goblin spelled backwards? Well, in short, it's the only challenge rating 1 god that you are ever going to fight in D&D. The Nilbog is the spirit of a goblin trickster god that possesses a goblin. And there's a chance for this to happen every single time that a goblin horde appears. In fact, maybe even if there's a group of 2 goblins, provided there's the potential for chaos and upset, there is an equal chance of one of these goblins becoming possessed by the spirit of a deity of tricksters. Now this spirit has a particular preference. They like to get up to mischief. And so to incentivize this, goblins always have one jester in their clans who's allowed to go wherever they want, do whatever they want to do, what have you, in the event that the Nilbog decides to possess one of their clan, because the Nilbog will instinctively jump towards the jester. Now, if you are chosen as the jester of your goblin and the Nilbog doesn't possess you, then you have a wonderfully comfy life. Everybody leaves you alone, everybody laughs at your jokes, everyone's a little bit nervous of you, but they do everything that you want them to do. You get to do anything that you want at any time, just in case you've been possessed already and the goblins don't want to upset their own god. But you may be thinking, in my goblin video, I mentioned that Maglubiet, the god of goblins and hobgoblins and bugbears, killed all the existing gods of goblins. So how has this one trickster god survived? Well, Maglubiet had actually decided to keep Kagorbayag alive in order to have them as an overseer of these goblin hordes on Maglubiet's behalf. So perhaps Maglubiet wasn't quite as ruthless as to wipe out all of the goblin gods, but apparently this nameless trickster god that is now the Nilbog was slain. But by the nature of being a trickster deity, this spirit ended up living on just to have the last laugh. It found itself without its former power, but immortal as a spirit that could possess other creatures, to still upset Maglubiet's plans and cause havoc. Now, the reason that this spirit doesn't have a name could be for numerous reasons. Goblins call it Nilbog because it is fascinated with the reverse of intentions. Its nature was to be slain, so the reverse of that is to live forever. Perhaps it wasn't even that powerful before it was killed, so they call it a reverse goblin, a Nilbog, but otherwise no one is encouraged to name this thing, potentially in case worship of it erupts. Maybe worshipping this creature only fuels its power, but it makes it become stronger, validates it as a deity. Or perhaps the goblins don't like to give it a proper name, in case Maglubiet hears of it and is enticed to finish the job that it started by killing the Nilbog spirit. But this creature absolutely terrifies hobgoblins, bugbears, all these huge, powerful creatures who dominate the much weaker, much more terrified goblins. Because although it is not the champion of the goblins, they still have to let this jester, potentially the Nilbog, do whatever it wants at any given time because it has immense power over everyone. It is absolutely immortal, and anything that wants to cause havoc, that cannot die no matter what, needs to be appeased and amused in case its attentions turn to disrupting your plans or perhaps even your life. The most sternwall and emotionless, honor-bound hobgoblin will still play along with a Nilbog and laugh at its jokes, no matter how good or bad they are, for fear of its attention. They always say that one of the reasons why the Joker was so obsessed with Batman is because he just wanted to make him laugh, to pierce through that stern expression, that joyless, humorless exterior. I think hobgoblins definitely don't want to present the same front in case they find themselves the lifetime spent accompanied by a Nilbog. The Nilbog wouldn't mind, it's immortal. It can spend an entire lifetime waiting around a hobgoblin, irritating it for the rest of its days. So let's talk about the Nilbog. What makes it so scary? Well, on the face of it, not too much. It's a troublemaker. We know that much. It's a small goblinoid. In fact, it is a goblin. With a chaotic evil alignment, it just wants to see the world burn, as they say. Cares nothing for plots and plans, only for its own amusement. Being fond of possessing jesters, it tends to jump into the body of a goblin that is fairly well armed. So it tends to have 13 armor class because of the leather armor or perhaps jester's gear that the goblin jester might be wearing. It has a tiny amount of hit points. It has 2d6 HP, doesn't modify anything to that, averages out at 7 HP according to Volo's guide, and it moves at a standard 30 feet. So far, pretty unremarkable. It has pretty universally normal stats across the board, only seeing a spike in dexterity and charisma where it has a +2 in each respectively. It has a +6 in stealth, just as goblins do. It has dark vision, and it can speak common and goblin. Nothing more complicated than that. As I've said before, it's a challenge rating 1 creature. At will, it can cause chaos to happen around it. It can conjure Mage Hand, or Tasha's hideous laughter, and incite vicious mockery whenever it wants to. It also has 1 use per day of the Confusion spell, so it can already get up to some pretty interesting tricks without any need for material components or anything like that. This stuff just happens around the Nilbog because it is pure chaos. After inciting anger and vengeance in people, it can nimble escape, taking the disengage or hide actions as a bonus action on each of its turns. Again, nothing too remarkable, but pretty interesting that you can infuriate someone and then run away pretty easily. It has a Jester's Scepter, which you can clonk people on the head with for a measly 1d6 +2 bludgeoning damage, and it has a short bow. Again, I imagine the goblin that it possesses was maybe armed, which can also do a pretty measly 1d6 +2 piercing damage. Not the end of the world. Certainly not something that you'd imagine whole goblin legions, hobgoblin armies, bugbear hosts, and so on being terrified of, but it has 2 really interesting abilities. The first one is called Nilbogism, and that reads as follows. Any creature that attempts to damage the Nilbog must first succeed on a difficulty 12 charisma saving throw, or be charmed until the end of the creature's turn. A creature charmed in this way must use its action praising the Nilbog. So, to start off with, Nilbog loves irritating people. Its whole nature is about frustrating people and forcing them to do the opposite of the actions that they want to do. That's the only thing that amuses the Nilbog. It is the opposite machine. Hence Nilbog. It strives to turn majestic and holy paladins into decrepit and base creatures filled with rage. It relishes in turning the wizard into a slumped idiot, devoid of all knowledge and patience. He wants to anger the monk, pacify the barbarian, show the ranger the virtues of city life, and to show the cleric what it's like to live on the wild side. To that end, every time a creature tries to strike the Nilbog, there's a chance that they'll be charmed by it. Literally, you intend to harm this thing, it's finally annoyed you enough to strike out at it. And if you actually manage to hit it, there's a chance that instead you'll fall to your knees in praise of it. Further to this infuriation machine, it has an amazing ability called Reversal of Fortune, which can be interpreted in one of two ways, and I'm interested to see how you guys would think about it. Because the exact wording in the book, in 5th edition, is: in response to another creature dealing damage to the Nilbog reduces the damage to 0 and regains 1d6 HP. Now, I've seen a lot of debate and chat online about whether or not this is a reaction, because if it's a reaction, then this can only happen once per turn, and it gets rid of all other reactions that the Nilbog might be able to do. But the way that that's worded doesn't say to me explicitly that that's a reaction. It says in response to another creature dealing damage to the Nilbog, but it doesn't say as a reaction. So to me, the wording of this claims that the Nilbog cannot be harmed, at least not intentionally, because the nature of Nilbogism means that you get a charisma saving throw, you might fail that charisma saving throw and then worship the Nilbog, but if you actually manage to strike it, the Nilbog decides that that damage is, well, not even decides, is automatically reduced to 0, and the Nilbog instead heals, because it is a reversal machine, it's an infuriation machine, and so the damage that you would deal to it only heals it, is how I interpret that. But also specifically, it does say in response to another creature dealing damage to the Nilbog. So you could potentially convince the Nilbog to hurt itself, which could kill the goblin that it's possessing, or you could cause a chain reaction which could hurt Nilbog. For example, another creature dealing damage to the Nilbog. Does that include the radius of a fireball? If you meant to strike something else and the Nilbog happens to be within the radius, the DM could rule that that is accidental damage. That's not you intending to damage the creature. However, the wording of this reaction does say that if a creature deals damage to it, which you still are with the spell. So that does pretty explicitly say reaction, doesn't it? Now, Reversal of Fortune does fall into a category called reactions. So potentially, and probably based on the actual rules there, it does say that the Nilbog only gets one of those per turn. Fair dues. It's utterly up to you how potent you want this Nilbog creature to be. But no matter how you choose to rule that, the Nilbog is still pretty much, actually, definitely immortal. So going by the canon rules there, the Nilbog can be hurt. It uses Reversal of Fortune as a reaction. That still happens after the charisma saving throw of Nilbogism takes effect. So it kind of has like a double save in the event of being harmed. But with its measly amount of HP, all it takes is for the Nilbog to invoke the ire of someone particularly strong, or a bunch of people all at once, to kill the goblin host. But that's just it. If the Nilbog can focus his attention and separate one person from the group to massively infuriate, then it's likely, at early levels, the Nilbog will be extraordinarily difficult to harm. But if you gang up on a Nilbog, you deal a series of attacks, statistically you get through its many saves and reactions, you can absolutely kill the host of the Nilbog. But then the Nilbog spirit simply removes itself from the goblin that it was possessing and roams around until it finds another goblin. In this state, it's completely indestructible, it cannot be harmed, but equally it can't deal any damage, it can't inflict any issues for your group, it can't even speak, so it can't annoy them. But equally, the spirit is not said to be invisible either. In fact, the only thing that it can do in this state is to fly, then try and find another goblin to possess. At which point, either the goblin willingly accepts the power of the Nilbog, which I don't honestly know why it would. I don't think the goblin is thinking anymore. I think Nilbog possesses this creature entirely until it dies, or until the Nilbog gets bored and chooses to leave its host, or is convinced to. But if a goblin is unwilling, It needs to pass a charisma saving throw or become possessed. If this goblin manages to pass, the Nilbog cannot possess them again for another 24 hours, can't attempt to. But with the nature of this infuriating trickster, it's probably likely that the Nilbog will try again in 24 hours unless it's found another more interesting host. Because the Nilbog doesn't like to remain a spirit. It likes to be in corporeal form and to cause as much havoc as possible, as frequently as possible, which it can only really do when it has a body. Now in our D&D adventure, where the Nilbog featured, where this thing became so massively important to us and a momentous and forever remembered monster in our campaigns, we were a band of maybe not the nicest people. We were conducting some business with a local gangster in a port town that we had never visited before, rich with magic. And we had this one player who in this adventure was a Tabaxi barbarian pirate. A really interesting combination if you are ever interested in, if you are stuck for ideas. And this player is slightly famous in the group for being the person who splits the party. He always goes off and does his own thing while we are doing sort of like the main story. And I don't honestly know if the DM was trying to warn him to not do that so that he didn't have to divide his attention, or if this was just the excuse that he was looking for, predicting or using predictable behaviors of the group to have one person separated. We were low level, so that fits us in the category of people who would be very, very infuriated by the Nilbog. And this pirate barbarian tabaxi called Barafin found himself in a dark alley. He was a righteous and noble person who kept his barbarian rages in check as a fierce sea lion and didn't want to inflame his ire by compromising his morals in a den of scum and villainy while we dealt with some local gangsters. And so exiting into a dark alley, he found a little goblin on a rooftop who said, "Hey, mister!" Intrigued, Barafin went over, started talking to him, introduced himself. He was a fan of his title as a captain of a ship, and noticing how proud he was of this, the Nilbog only referred to him as Mr., never as his real name. And gradually, little by little, this ate away at Barafin. Nilbog invited him to a party, something that the very stern Barafin would not do. Didn't want to have fun, he was on a mission. The Nilbog kept following him. Barafin kept running away, the Nilbog kept chasing him, appearing at the end of corridors whenever he turned around, wouldn't leave him alone, until Barafin decided to exact a rage, to go into combat and fight this thing alone, showing his hot-blooded temper. And this was a regular occurrence. Every time Barafin was by himself, the Nilbog would appear, making him angrier and angrier every time he saw him. Because we were never there. None of our adventurers knew the Nilbog existed. We thought that he was just making it up. And every time he was alone, he would lose his cool a little bit quicker, a little bit worse. Utterly maddening, both the player and the barbarian. He was a staple of our tabletop adventures, almost as much as another character joining our group. Only one that we never saw. It only infuriated Barafin more that we believed that he had an imaginary friend that wanted to invite him to parties, till eventually we finally met the Nilbog. We had to go into a cave full of goblins. Actually, I believe it was a sewer filled with goblins underneath this city, in which sat the Goblin King. All of these were hostile, and I don't think the DM had quite planned for us to go down there, or at least had not planned for the encounter to be quite so hard. I was playing my completely inept rogue. My completely inept rogue, Wyatt, that I've mentioned before in some of my stories on here, who pretty much fell unconscious in every single encounter, so he was no use whatsoever. And eventually the Nilbog showed up, flipped a coin, and decided that disrupting the plans of the goblins was more amusing than disrupting our plans. So the Nilbog actually helped us so that he could get closer to Barafin and infuriate him more. In the end, we finally met the Nilbog, and he was nothing but helpful for us, so we praised him. We absolutely adored him for his time with us, and couldn't understand why Barafin was annoyed by him, which only infuriated him even more. As an interesting twist, the DM decided that as we had kind of built up the Nilbog to be something utterly, indescribably powerful, it could not be harmed by any means, because we were terrible at rolls and just never happened to hit it. The DM ruled that us praising the Nilbog for his efforts for being so kind and helpful to us was the thing that actually separated the Nilbog spirit from the goblin within, killing the goblin and sending the Nilbog off forever. Killing it with kindness, because it's a reverse creature, which I thought was really fun. So whenever this player wanders off on their own in future, we do have a little joke to ourselves just saying, "Hey, mister! Hey, mister!" to wind him up. But the chaos that our DM managed to invoke through one small character that has a handful of spells, is a challenge rating 1, and is otherwise just an immortal spirit of irritation, amused me forever. I really liked his spin on the Nilbog being able to be harmed by kindness. And in fact, I think in first edition as well, it was the case, and you can correct me if I'm wrong because I don't have a copy of first edition's Nilbog sheet, but I believe that the Nilbog was so in tune with the concept of being reversed that healing spells could harm it, and attempts to harm it would heal it. I really like that idea, and I think the Nilbog, whether I use its staple stats or if I edit them more to improve the feel of the Nilbog, with this kind of infinite reversal of fortune thing that I mentioned earlier, or if I use simply one reaction as per 5th edition's proper rules, I think the Nilbog will be forever one of those things that I'm desperate to put in almost every campaign that I can, so long as it doesn't become stale, among things like the deck of many things. So I hope you enjoyed today's video. I really love drawing the Nilbog. It was a wonderful thing to visualize for me and my party, and also I got to draw my little Nilbog, my Myrtle, in part anyway. This is one of my absolute favourite monsters. I'm so glad that this amazing moment from one of my favourite campaigns has been crystallised in the Nilbog, and I really hope that you guys get a chance to use it too, because if you want to have fun with your characters, if someone makes a particularly edgy character that just needs to be taken less seriously, or if you want to just have fun with a campaign, I urge you to use a Nilbog. Something that just by its nature is infuriating and will always crop back up is a great recurring villain, even if it gets squashed in 2 attacks by your massively high level players. The Nilbog will always return because there will always be goblins, and if you kill it enough times you might just invoke its attention on your party forever. Anyway guys, thank you so much for joining me. If you liked this video, please make sure to leave it a little thumbs up, perhaps favourite the video, share it with your group, and subscribe to this channel to catch more of my videos that I make each week. The channel is still growing, so everything that you can do like that really helps us, and I cannot thank you enough for all of that help and effort. If every person here shared this video with one person they know likes D&D, then I think this channel would absolutely explode. But if you want to help us in a different way, if you want to help financially, or if you just really like this picture and you'd like a copy of it for yourself, you can head over to my Patreon page where backers at various different levels get lots of different rewards. Some of those rewards being a digital or a physical version of every monster that I draw each month. Other people get homebrew creatures or creations that I come up with, little polished PDFs. And if you're interested in seeing more from me, I also have a Facebook, a Twitter, and an Instagram. Anyway, until Friday, where I'll be doing my anniversary video, have a lovely week guys, don't split the party, and I'll see you next time.